Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our Karthik month special. So we'll continue with Hari Katha today. We are all waiting anxiously for Lord Krishna to appear. And so was Kamsa. So we had mentioned that Marichi's 6 sons had been cursed for offending Lord Brahma. And they were cursed that they will take birth again to be killed immediately after their birth. So who was Kamsa in his previous life? So we mentioned that he was Kalanemi in his previous life. So the word Kala means time. And essentially, he is the wheel of time. He is the grandson of Prahlad. So Kalanemi is the grandson of Prahlad. In one of the wars in which Kalanemi participated, where the Asuras were on one side and the demigods were on the other side, he was a very fierce warrior. The Devatas could not defeat him, and therefore they propitiate Lord Vishnu to come. And Lord Vishnu comes on his Garuda, and a fierce battle ensues. Kalanemi manages to hurt Garuda, and the minute Garuda gets hurt, Vishnu releases his Sudarshan Chakra and cuts off his neck. So as we said, Kala means time. Nemi means the portion of a wheel. So hence it represents a time segment of the wheel of time. Kala, of course, also means black. And because he was an Asura, he was fully in the mode of darkness. Yeah. So the legend has it that in this Tarakamaya war, that Kalanemi fought on the side of Soma. So this particular pastime is there in the Padma Purana about this war. He was such a fierce warrior that people were terrified of him. The Devatas were terrified upon seeing him. So Kalanemi releases many weapons to attack Lord Vishnu. But when he somehow or the other with his mace hits Garuda's head, that's when the Lord employs the Sudarshan Chakra. So Kalanemi had 6 sons. And in their previous births, these 6 sons were the sons of Marichi. Marichi is a Manasika Putra of Lord Brahma. And they were cursed because they were actually cursed by Hiranyakashipu. Somehow or the other, they worshipped Lord Brahma and ended up getting cursed by Hiranyakashipu. So the curse of Hiranyakashipu was that his 6 grandsons would be sent to Patal Lok, and they would stay asleep for many millions of years. Later on, this curse was amended, and in this curse, they will occupy the womb of Mother Devaki, and ultimately, Kalanemi would be born as Kamsa, and Kamsa would kill, as a son of Ugrasena and Padmavati, he would kill all these 6 sons immediately after their birth. So as we mentioned, these 6 sons represents the 6 anarthas that we have. So only when you get rid of the anarthas will the Lord come and occupy your heart. So in this particular pastime, the Lord first comes as Sankarshana. So if you read the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10 in the 2nd chapter, the Lord is having a conversation with Yogamaya. And he tells Yogamaya, within the womb of Devaki, my partial plenary expansion, known as Sankarshana or Shesha will occupy the womb of Devaki. And he instructs Yogamaya, you take this Sankarshana and transfer Sankarshana to the womb of Rohini. And the Lord also says that this Sankarshana will be known as Rama, one who brings a great deal of pleasure to the Brajavasis, to his devotees. He will also be known as Bala, who has significant, not just physical prowess and strength, but Balaram possesses spiritual strength. So the Lord also tells Durga Devi that because of her potency, now keep in mind, the Shakti potency of the Lord is the same. So the devotees of the Lord experience the Shakti potency of the Lord as Yogamaya. Those who are not devotees of the Lord experience that same Shakti potency as Durga Devi. The potency is the same. So if you look at it that way, the Shakti potency is the same. It is your mood that determines whether you are experiencing Yogamaya or you are under the control of Mahamaya. So it's our consciousness that determines our experience. So that means to purify our consciousness, when we begin to chant the holy names of the Lord, then we are under the protection of Yogamaya. If we are not chanting the holy names of the Lord, then we are under complete control of Mahamaya. So the Lord instructs her, Yogamaya, to transfer the child. And the Lord also tells Yogamaya that in the material world, Jivatmas will worship her. They will worship her as Maya Devi. And that she will be called by different names. The Lord is speaking to Yogamaya and saying that she will be worshipped as Durga, as Bhadrakali, as Vijaya, Vaishnavi, Kumuda, Chandika, Madhavi, Kanyaka, Maya, Narayani, Ishani, Sharada, and Ambika and Krishna. So Lord Krishna blesses Yogamaya, saying, when she comes into the material world, she will be worshipped in all these different facets. And after receiving this instruction, Yogamaya acknowledges the instructions and then follows the instructions. But before she does that, what does she do? She circumambulates the Lord. She does pradakshina, and then from there she leaves for Bhuloka, the planet Earth, and goes to Nanda Gokula. And she does exactly what the Lord asks her to do. After that, the Lord then occupies Mother Devaki's womb. First, he comes into the mind of Vasudeva. Then from the mind of Vasudeva, he is transferred to the mind of Devaki. And then he has occupied the womb. So the seventh child was assumed to be a miscarriage. And at that time, Kamsa was thinking, when he visits Devaki, she looks so resplendent. She looks so beautiful. Now, what to do? There is a pastime of Rukmini Devi in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Rukmini Devi has never seen Lord Krishna. But she has heard about all of his pastimes. So Rukmini Devi is considered as an avatar of Sri Lakshmi Devi herself. And she is venerated in our culture. She is worshipped as the consort of the Lord. So her father, Bhishmaka, who's the king of Vidarbha, and they all actually belong to the Bhoja dynasty only. So she had 5 older brothers, and one of her brothers, Rukmi, had a very good friendship with Shishupal. And he wanted Rukmini Devi to be married to Shishupal. And reluctantly, the father Rukma agrees. So the minute Lakshmi Devi finds out that her wedding was fixed with Shishupal, because she had already fallen in love with Krishna simply by hearing about him, she developed a desire to marry Krishna. How can you fall in love with someone that you don't know anything about? Because she had heard so much about Krishna, she falls in love with him. And immediately in her mind, she had already surrendered to the Supreme Lord. So what does she do? She does something astonishing. She writes a letter, and she wants that letter to be hand-delivered by a faithful Brahmana who delivers it to Krishna. And Krishna reads the letter. And in the letter it says, "Come and fetch me. I do not want to marry this Shishupal. My heart has already been given to you." And she asks Krishna to abduct her. And she gives him instructions. She tells him, "I will be visiting the temple of goddess Ambika on the morning of the wedding. So when I am there, that's when you should come and abduct me." So when Krishna receives this message, he sends back a reply through that same Brahmana, telling her, "Message received, acknowledged, I'm ready to make you my wife." So immediately Krishna sets out to Vidarbha along with Balaram. So meantime, the marriage is being prepared for, and Rukmini was growing very, very anxious. Where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? Where is Krishna? She was wondering, will the Lord come? So she was growing very, very distressed. And she was thinking, this is the end of my life. This is the end of my life if the Lord doesn't come to rescue me. Right? But somehow or the other, the Lord comes and he just picks her up, puts her on his chariot, much to the astonishment of Shishupal and Rukmi and the others. They begin to fight with Krishna. And Krishna is ready to kill Rukmi. But Rukmini begs him, "Spare my brother's life." The Lord said, "Okay, theek hai, I will spare your brother's life." However, he shaves Rukmi's hair and mustache as a mark of punishment and then sets him free. So like this, Rukmini, simply by hearing about Krishna, hearing about his pastimes, falls in love with him. Kamsa, hearing that voice saying, "You fool, the 8th child will kill you," he also starts meditating on Krishna. There was not a moment when he was not thinking about Krishna. So just as much as Rukmini was thinking about Krishna, having heard about his pastimes, Kamsa was thinking of Krishna, but in absolute fear. So once you hear Akashvani like that, obviously you're going to be thinking about it all the time, because you know that your death is around the corner and it's going to be at the hands of the Supreme Lord. So Kamsa also was beset with anxiety. The seventh child was a miscarriage. And so now the Lord has occupied the womb of Mother Devaki. And as he is occupying the womb of Mother Devaki, the Devatas come. The Devatas come to worship the Lord because they know finally their prayer has been answered. Remember, they all went along with Bhumi Devi in the form of a cow, along with Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, to worship Kshirodakashayi Vishnu and ask him to intervene and set things right. Yes. So Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Narada Muni, Vyasadev, Indra, Chandra, Varuna, they come into the room where Devaki is locked. And they begin to offer their prayers to the Supreme Lord. They begin to glorify the Lord for many, many shlokas, saying that he is the Supreme Personality. He is the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of everything. And ultimately, the body is going to experience old age, disease, and finally death. And that he has come to destroy the false ego of Kamsa and the false ego of so many other demoniac forces. So in this way, they are worshipping the Lord. And one of the shlokas, they tell the Lord, you know, you are the consort of Goddess Lakshmi. So when devotees worship you, sometimes they may make mistakes. Sometimes they may fall away from the path of devotion. However, you always protect them because they have performed even a little bit of bhakti, my dear Lord, you protect them. Unlike those who never acknowledge you, and therefore you don't protect them. Even if they don't acknowledge you, actually the Lord protects them in so many different ways, right? He supplies everything for them. Therefore, the devotees, the demigods say, are fearless because they are connected in devotional service with you. And then they talk about how the Lord takes so many different incarnations for the pleasure of his devotees. And having glorified the Lord, they also give us an important instruction in one of the shlokas, which you will hear again in the Bhagavad Gita when the Lord speaks the Bhagavad Gita later on. And in the 36th shloka, they tell the Lord, your name, your form, your attributes, this can only be understood by bhakti. Nama, Rupa, Guna, Leela, all four can only be understood with bhakti, and it begins with Nama. From Nama, you go to Rupa. You can then understand the form of the Lord. From Rupa, you go to Guna. You can then understand the qualities of the Lord. And from Guna, you go to Leela. Then you can really appreciate the pastimes of the Lord. But to appreciate the pastimes of the Lord, it has to begin with chanting the holy names of the Lord. So while all of us are absorbed in this particular pastime, Kamsa was also absorbed. He was also Krishna conscious. But he was not Krishna conscious in a favorable way. So he was practicing Krishna conscious unfavorably. When you read the pastime of Jaya and Vijaya in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the 4 Sanat Kumaras curse Jaya and Vijaya, the Lord comes out to pacify not just the Sanat Kumaras, but also his own personal servants, Jaya and Vijaya. who are the gatekeepers of Vaikuntha. And in a couple of shlokas, the Lord tells them not to worry because they have been cursed to be his opponents in the material world. And the Lord tells them, you will always be thinking about me. But you will be thinking about me with anger and envy. But still, don't worry, you will come back to me. Right? So the Lord says this to Jaya and Vijay, who later on take on the forms of the ferocious Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksh, then Ravana and Kumbhakarna, then Shishupal and Dantavakra. So the Lord promises them, even before they leave the Vaikuntha planet, the Lord promises them that they will be Krishna conscious, but they will do so unfavorably. They will do it with the mood of anger. And that is what Kamsa's mood was, filled with anger. That he is going to be destroyed by the Supreme Lord. Of course, Kamsa does not remember at this point that he is Jaya or Vijaya. No. So simply by chanting the holy names of the Lord, we can purify our consciousness. We can appreciate the beauty of the Lord. Then we can appreciate the qualities of the Lord. And finally, we can appreciate the Leelas of the Lord. But everything begins with chanting the holy names. Chanting the holy names, it's so important, especially in Kali Yuga, to constantly chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It is the topmost form of austerity that we can keep, is to chant the holy names of the Lord. So once Satyabhama is speaking to Lord Krishna, and she asks him, how did I get this good fortune of being your wife? She was curious. How did I get this good fortune of being your wife? And the Lord responds to her by saying, my dear Satyabhama, in your previous life, you were living in Haridwar along with your father, who was a Brahmin. And your name was Gunavali. And you were a very, very obedient daughter. So this Gunavali did not have a mother. So she was being raised by her father alone. So of course, once the girl comes of age, every parent is anxious to get them married. So the father had a disciple by the name Chandra. And the plan was to marry his daughter Gunavali to Chandra. So the marriage takes place. And one day, the father and the son-in-law go into the forest to pick up some kusha grass. While they were in the forest, they were killed by a demon, both the father and the son-in-law. So now Gunavali was all alone. And she was thinking, how am I going to survive? But she was brought up in such a pious way, she remembered two instructions that her father had given her. One was to observe the Uttana Ekadesi Vrat during the Karthik month, which is the second Ekadesi in this month. So she performed this Vrat very, very nicely. And the second instruction was to take a dip in the holy river in Karthik month. So which she does. So, but then she's in such a weak state out of despondency, but still being so weak, she still stuck to the vrat of keeping that Ekadesi fast and also taking a dip in the Ganges. She was so weak, and as she takes a dip in the Ganges, she leaves her body. She passes away. And that too, she was taking a dip in the Ganges during the Brahma Muhurta time when it is very cold. And because she followed the instructions of her father by keeping the Ekadasi Vrat and also by taking a dip in the Ganges during the Brahma Muhurta time, in spite of her being quite seriously ill, she actually enters Vaikuntha. And so the Lord tells her, in Dwapara Yuga, you have come as my wife, Satyabhama. And your father has come back as Satrajit in Dwapara Yuga. And your husband, Chandra, who was earlier her husband, has now come in Dwapara Yuga as Akrura. So great devotees of the Lord come back to take association of the Lord. So when the Lord performs his pastimes, the devotees also come with him. Do you remember when we read that the Lord had instructed that all the demigods, their wives, all of them had to come and perform their role in this pastime. And they simply followed the Lord's instructions. So just by observing one Ekadasi Vrat in Karthik month, if you can go to the Vaikuntha planet, then imagine if you're chanting the holy names of the Lord all the time. So now that the Devatas had come and glorified the Lord, the Kinnaras and the Gandharvas came because the Lord was about to come into the world. So all of them began to chant the holy names of the Lord, sing and dance in ecstasy. And Shukadev Goswami spends 5 shlokas in the 3rd chapter describing the scene on earth. The Lord appeared at midnight, not exactly the most pious time. The Lord appeared inside a jail cell, not exactly a pious place. But Shukadev Goswami describes that the earth was surcharged with goodness, beauty, and peace. And the constellation Rohini has appeared. All the stars, all the planets were all very peaceful. The earth itself seemed so auspicious. The rivers were flowing with clear water. The lakes were full of lilies, lotuses. Everything just looked perfect and beautiful. Why? Because the Lord was about to appear. So the breeze was pure. Everything was just so pleasing. The flowers were just so fragrant. The fires of the yajna was burning very nicely. They were not disturbed by the breeze. And the saints and brahmanas, even though the demon has been disturbing them so much, they felt at peace. At the core of their hearts, they felt peace, except for Kamsa. So the Gandharvas, the Kinnaras, everybody come. They shower their flowers. After the Devatas have worshipped the Lord, they also circumambulate Devaki. And they tell her, it is not only their good fortune, but it is her good fortune that the Lord has occupied her womb. And saying this, the Lord appears and the Devatas leave back to their respective places. So now it is pitch dark outside and the full moon has risen and Vasudev sees his child for the first time. And what is he seeing? Shukadev Goswami describes, the Lord had wonderful lotus-like eyes, Pundari Kaksha. It is a very unusual birth. In his 4 hands, he had 4 weapons, the Shankha, Chakra, Gada, and Padma. And Vasudev sees on the chest of the Lord the mark of Srivatsa. And around his neck was this beautiful Kaustubha gem. And how was the Lord dressed? in yellow garments. What was the color of his body? Dark, like a dense, rain-laden cloud. What about the hair on his head? Fully grown, Shukadev Goswami says. It was all scattered all over the place. And the Lord came with helmet, earrings, everything. He was fully dressed. He had a brilliant belt. He had armlets. He had bangles. So many ornaments. Quite astonishing. So the Lord appeared as Narayana. And Vasudeva is looking at his newborn, and he was just awestruck. And he was thinking, I'm so unfortunate. This is the time to rejoice. This is the time to celebrate. I can't give in charity because I have a son. So mentally, he collects 10,000 cows and distributes them to the Brahmanas. So in his mind, he was having a transcendental feast. So imagine taking darshan of the Lord, what happens to you? Your entire consciousness gets transformed. So Vasudeva could understand that this is actually the Supreme Lord. He had 6 other sons. He didn't get that same experience. But here was the Supreme Lord, Narayana, who had appeared. So certainly Vasudeva becomes very, very fearless. What does he do? He bows down to the Lord. And he begins to offer prayers to Lord Narayana. And because Lord Narayana had appeared, the jail was brilliantly lit. The darkness was dissipated. Yeah. There is a saying, when Krishna is there, darkness cannot exist. So Vasudeva begins to glorify the Lord in many shlokas. And he says, my dear Lord, I understand that you have come for the pleasure of your devotees, that you are about to kill this demoniac person, Kamsa. He has already killed 6 of your brothers. That's what Vasudeva tells his son. That this Kamsa is such a demoniac person, he's already killed 6 of your older brothers. Yeah. And he calls Kamsa as the most uncivilized person. Vasudeva is describing Kamsa as the most uncivilized man. And my dear Lord, when he finds out that you have come, when his servants inform him that you have come, certainly they will all come with weapons to kill you. So Vasudeva is experiencing such a mix of emotions. Great joy, jubilation that the Lord had finally arrived. And similarly, as a father, simultaneously, he was looking at the Lord as the Supreme Lord, and simultaneously he was experiencing those fatherly feelings. How am I going to protect you? Because Kamsa is going to come. I couldn't protect the other 6 children. How am I going to protect you? So Vasudeva was experiencing a father's anxiety. And now, when Devaki sees the Supreme Lord, she also begins to pray to the Lord like he is the Supreme Lord. So she also glorifies the Lord in many shlokas. And then she says, you have come here by your mercy, and you are going to dispel all of the fear that your devotees are experiencing. You have come here as death itself for Kamsa. And she says, because you are the Supreme Lord and you always protect your devotees, please protect Vasudeva and me. Please protect us from this evil Kamsa. And then she asks the Lord, this 4-handed form of yours is certainly going to be like a grand announcement that the Supreme Lord has appeared. This is the same Vishnu that the yogis meditate on, my dear Lord. But please make yourself invisible so nobody can see this. So the mother is now experiencing anxiety. On the one hand, she is glorifying the Lord because she recognizes that this is the Supreme Lord. On the other hand, the mother is experiencing deep anxiety. What is going to happen to her son? And in one of the shlokas, Devaki says, "Oh Madhusudana, because of your appearance, I am becoming more and more anxious in fear of Kamsa. So please arrange it such that Kamsa does not understand that you have taken birth from my womb." She says, arrange it in such way that Kamsa does not know that you have come from my womb. So, two requests from Devaki. One, he should conceal his form. Two, Kamsa should not know that he has come from her womb. Right? So again, she repeats, please withdraw the form and be like a natural human child so that I can try to hide you. How will I hide you with your Shankha Chakra and all of that? How can I hide you? So you please look like an ordinary child so that we can hide you, we can protect you somehow or the other. So saying this, hearing Vasudev glorifying him, hearing Mother Devaki glorifying him, the Supreme Lord speaks to both of them. And he tells them about their history. He tells Mother Devaki, in one of your previous births, in the Swayambhuva millennium, you were known as Prishni, and Vasudev was known as Sutapa. And because you were ordered by Lord Brahma to have children, you underwent severe austerities. And because you desired to have me as your son, I came as your son, Prishni Garbha. But then this only happened after they performed austerities for 12,000 celestial years. So much tapas they had to perform before the Lord could occupy their womb as Prishni Garbha. So after that, Krishna tells them, later on, I actually came again as your son, because Devaki and Vasudev had a desire that the Lord would appear as their son, and they get that benediction for three births. So the Lord has to appear as their son again. So the Lord tells them, in the following millennium, again I came as your son. You were my mother Aditi, and you were my father Kashyapa. At that time, when I came as your son, I was known as Upendra, the dwarf Vamana. Because I am so pleased with you, this is the third time I'm coming as your son. So I am that same son who came to you as Prishni Garbha. I am that same son who came to you as Upendra or Vamana. Now I'm coming to you as Vasudeva. So why have I shown you my form as Narayana? To remind you that I have indeed come already as your son. So I want you to know that I am the Supreme Lord, so that all fear from you should disappear. If I had come as an ordinary child, you would never believe that I was the Supreme Personality of the Lord. Krishna himself says this to Vasudeva and Devaki. If I had come as a normal child, I would not have been able to convince you that I am the Supreme Lord. In this particular birth, the Lord doesn't stick around with them. He's about to leave. So he gives them an instruction. He says, I want you to always think of me as your son. But at the same time, I want you to know that I am the Supreme Lord. So when you think of me constantly with so much love and affection, he says, at the end of this cycle of your birth, you will go back to Vaikuntha. So the Lord has given them two instructions. Always remember me as your son, but never forget that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So constantly think of me this way, develop that love and affection. And when you meditate on me like this, you will go back to the spiritual world. There's no more birth for you after this. Yeah. So after having said this, the Lord transforms himself into the beautiful little child, Krishna. And that's it. From here, Vasudeva has to take over. He has to figure out what to do. So in this particular shloka, Prabhupada writes, this is that same Krishna who's mentioned in the first canto of Bhagavatam as Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. You are that same Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. So now that the Lord has hidden his four-handed form and outwardly looks like an ordinary child, so Vasudeva picks up the child because through the potency of Yoga Maya, it was revealed to him that the best way to protect his son is to transfer him to Gokul. So, but he has to be helped because after all, he's in prison, he's in shackles, the doors are locked. So here is where Yoga Maya comes. Yoga Maya always protects her devotees, the devotees of the Lord. So Shukadev Goswami explains that Yoga Maya comes to help Vasudeva. How does she do that? Suddenly all the doorkeepers fall asleep. Everyone in the palace had fallen into a deep sleep. The doors fall open. The shackles come loose. There was a light rain and thunder outside. And Anantashesh appears. Because Vasudeva had placed the child in a little basket. A servant of the Lord always wants to be a servant. So Anantashesh comes to protect his master, complete with all the hoods protecting not just Vasudeva, but also the transcendental child. Indra was so happy. He was sending rains. Yamuna was so happy. She was filled with deep water, foaming. And just as the ocean gave way to Lord Ramachandra, when he had to cross over to get to Lanka, similarly, the river Yamuna gives way to Vasudeva and allowed him to cross without any incident. There is a beautiful pastime that says, it's not there in the Bhagavatam. There is a beautiful pastime that says, Yamuna was so anxious to touch the lotus feet of the Lord that she rises up and Krishna's feet were dangling over the basket. The minute she touches the lotus feet of the Lord, she just goes down. Yes. There's one more pastime that Prabhupada talks about, which again is not there in the Bhagavatam. And Krishna topples out of the basket into the Yamuna river as Vasudeva is carrying him across the Yamuna. And Vasudeva is so beset with anxiety, he just immediately reaches down and plucks his child. So it is just the Lord's Leela to show how much his devotees really love him. even in the mode of a father. Yes. So Vasudeva was internally instructed to take the child to the house of Nanda Maharaj. He reaches the house. Even there, by the potency of Yoga Maya, everybody was fast asleep. At the same time that Krishna appears in Mathura, at that same time, Yoga Maya has appeared in the womb of Yashoda. So Vasudeva places Krishna besides Mother Yashoda, who's in deep sleep. He picks up the daughter, who's an expansion of Yoga Maya, and then comes back to the prison house of Kamsa. And when he comes back, the gates are shut, the shackles are back on his legs, and he places the baby girl on the bed of Devaki and stays there. Now, neither Devaki nor Mother Yashoda remembers anything. Yashoda doesn't even know whether she had a girl child or a male child. She was just exhausted. So what happens next? Join us tomorrow to hear about the atrocities of Kamsa.